Hey gang, Dark Knave here with his henchman Cram, and our review of this week's The Flash on the CW. Well, we're finally going to Earth 2, and the episode starts off with Barry basically saying his goodbyes to his family because he's not sure if he's going to come back, and then we see him getting packed up with Cisco and Wells to go and save Jesse, Wells' daughter. Which begs the question, I think, isn't there one more guy from Earth 2 who should be going on that ride? Because they close all of the Nexus points, so there's only one left. Yeah. They're going to shut it down.
Who is it?
You might want to take that guy with you, I'm just saying.
Just maybe want to take Jay with you, just saying. However, there's a good reason for him to stay behind, of course. As they talk about in the episode, hey, we need you to stay here, just in case if anything goes wrong. Which, of course, it does.
Of course. So the cool thing is when they get over to Earth 2, there's a stylistic choice here. The worlds look very different. We've got the Flash's regular universe, looks like modern society, but Earth 2 looks more like something we would have seen in the comics version of the Justice Society of America. One cool thing to note, and I don't know how many people are going to pick up on this, or even if it was intentional, the entire feel of Earth 2 is helped by a sort of golden yellow tone to everything, which is funny because Earth 2 in the books is known as the Earth 2 Golden Age heroes of the Justice Society of America. Not sure if that was intentional or not, but if it was, very cool.
Lots of Easter eggs in this episode altogether, even starting with as they enter into Earth 2, you see a whole series of images that they're advised to not pay attention to, but of course we have to pay attention to them. And who do we see? We see the likes of Jonah Hex, and Supergirl, and Gorilla Grodd.
We have a Legion of Superheroes flight ring. We've got a Green Arrow, which could be either Connor Hawke or future Green Arrow. I think I saw an armored or potentially a robotic arm in that mix, so that could very well be. So they get through the tunnel, they get over to Earth 2. The first person they run into is Dr. Wells' lab assistant, Mr. Hewitt. For those of you who remember Mr. Hewitt, and Barry and Cisco sure do because they react very poorly to the situation. He was the person who was supposed to bond with Firestorm, but it was unsuccessful and he turned into the supervillain known as Tokamak earlier in the season.
As they get in, they find out that Cisco is not able to use his power due to the fact that Earth 2 resonates at a different frequency, and so therefore his glasses don't work. And so they need to go out and do some sleuthing to see if they can find out where Zoom is hiding at.
Barry's idea is to go and grab his doppelganger, which he does almost immediately to the shock of Cisco and Wells and to Barry's doppelganger. Good thing Barry's doppelganger is a CSI, as we see him doing an interview on the news talking about Zoom and how he is trying to figure out who Zoom's identity is for Mayor Snart. Clever.
Nice little tie-in right there. So Barry assumes his identity and goes over to the police station. And again, we have more Easter eggs here. As who does he run into? But Deadshot.
Yeah, Detective Floyd Lawton, who apparently is terrible with his gun. So that's an ironic twist for his Earth 2 counterpart. We also meet Detective West, Detective Iris West Allen, who winds up being married to Barry. We also get to see their police chief, although in this universe he's a fedora-wearing, well-groomed villain who gets dragged off by the other police officers to, no doubt, a jail cell. So everything is upside down, backwards and forwards on this Earth.
Back over on Earth 1, of course, as we knew was going to happen, problem appears in the form of Geomancer.
Geomancer is a B, C-list villain from DC, has the ability to create earthquakes. Pretty cool costume for him, love the goggles. And of course now there's no Barry there to fight him, so we turn to Jay.
As we find out in the Geomancer story arc for Earth 1, Jay's loss of power isn't actually due to Zoom. Turns out it's due to his own use of Velocity 6.
Yeah, he was using Velocity 6 on his Earth to power himself up, and it actually did work. But then the reverse happened, he lost all his speed, and now it's actually killing him. Caitlin, upon hearing this, decides to take it upon herself to create a newer version of the Velocity formula to give him back his speed and hopefully cure him in the form of Velocity 7.
Back over on Earth 2, we have Iris and Barry going out to the club, which is actually a nightclub instead of a coffee shop, where it turns out Joe is no longer a detective, but he's a lounge singer, and a very good one at that.
And a lounge singer who hates Barry's guts.
Yeah, So they have a hate-hate relationship with each other, and Barry doesn't know quite how to respond to that. You can see he's trying to feel out and find out really what's going on here, and the characters react to this in terms of saying, dude, what's going on? But not strongly enough, in my opinion. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, I think this is where things kind of start to come off the rails a little bit in the acting department for the Flash, or maybe it's the writing. But he's really giving off clues that he doesn't belong in this Earth, and nobody's picking up on this, especially his detective wife, who's got a watch that shows that he's a metahuman.
I mean, come on. You can't get any more obvious than that. She should have been able to figure this out.
So we have two new supervillains from Earth 2 showing up on the scene in the form of Killer Frost, Caitlin's doppelganger, and Deathstorm, Robbie's doppelganger. Interesting fight scene breaks out in the fact that they are about to maul everyone in the club when Barry drags them both outside in a burst of speed and fights them in what amounts to a suit and some, I'm sure, treadless shoes that wouldn't really be very helpful in a fight.
And in the fight, we get another little Easter egg where Barry goes over to the statue of the Flash, grabs his helmet, uses that to reflect back fireballs from Deathstorm, and is able to take out Killer Frost and win the day, or at least win the moment.
Well, they win the moment until they realize that Joe has been critically injured in the fight and has to be taken to the hospital. So that leaves us back to Earth 1, where, speaking of the Flash's helmet, we get to see Jay in a fight with Geomancer with now the Speed Force again, thanks to Velocity 7, where he does a pretty cool move where he takes off his helmet and punches the back of it as quickly as he can to create a sonic blast that knocks Geomancer down.
Ultimately, the Velocity 7 doesn't hold out, though, and he is left defenseless. Joe comes to his aid by putting a couple shots in Geomancer's chest, which gets him to run away.
Later on, we see Barry over in Earth 2 bringing Cisco in to help Detective West track down and capture Killer Frost with the help of some tech he's developed. Iris initially doesn't want him to come along, but she ultimately takes Floyd and Cisco and heads out to find Killer Frost and Deathstorm in what looks like an abandoned factory.
Here we see the final doppelganger, Reverb, come out of the shadows. And who is it? Cisco. As was teased earlier on in the episode when Cisco was wondering who his doppelganger was going to be. They have a little moment together where Reverb tries to get him to come over to the dark side, and quite literally with a nice little Star Wars reference, which was pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, and then of course Cisco calls for help and Barry shows up on the scene, and then we get to see evil Cisco, who should have a goatee, I think, using his abilities in a way that is very reminiscent of the way Vibe was first introduced in the DC Universe by using a sonic blast that knocks Barry down.
It's a nice little tease in terms of what Cisco may be able to do in the long term, and Reverb even tells him, you're not using your powers to the fullest capabilities. So a lot more to come for the Cisco character, certainly over the rest of this season and in future episodes.
So then we're treated to a beatdown of Barry by both Reverb and Deathstorm, while Killer Frost is in the background screaming that they need to keep him alive because that's Zoom's orders. Although Reverb doesn't care at this point, he feels he can use Cisco and Barry to his advantage to take over power from Zoom, who shows up and immediately basically kills Deathstorm and Reverb in one shot.
At that point, Zoom threatens Killer Frost, but does not kill her because he recognizes the fact that she knew her place, grabs Barry, and takes off to a secret hideout.
This leaves Cisco alone in the abandoned warehouse with Killer Frost, which should propel us into the events of next week's episode. And that leaves us a couple of very interesting points. Number one being how convenient Reverb is laying there dead, wearing a pair of glasses that are tuned to the frequency of the world that Cisco is now in.
Barry has inevitably found Jesse, but he is locked up in a cage that he probably couldn't get out of on his own. And we also are treated to someone who is across the way, who's tapping on the glass.
Wearing a full metal mask, so I'm sure we'll find out that that's a doppelganger of somebody from Earth 1 at some point. We're not sure. Overall, I thought this was a great episode. I think this is the one that everybody's been waiting for, and the ratings prove it. This is like the biggest episode CW's had in quite a few years. The Flash is doing very well for them, and it's well-deserved because it's quite a great show.
Thought they did a really good job as far as with the special effects and the styling of Earth 2. Really gave that different feel overall, and all of the Easter eggs were really nice, especially for people who could recognize all those little things. I thought one of the best Easter eggs that they put in was the phone and the names that were on the phone.
Also, something I want to mention that I've been noticing in this show for quite some time, the comic book to live action can be a pretty daunting task sometimes, and the Flash has some powers in the book that for a very long time I thought would come off as very cheesy in real life. The 80s Flash show suffered from a little of that, but I gotta say, things like arm whirlwinds and moving so quickly that he makes doppelgangers of himself, and now we've got Jay punching his helmet to make a sonic boom. I mean, a lot of these things, when I say them out loud, sound like they would look ridiculous, but I gotta tell you, they are pulling them off on the show. Everything looks great. The special effects are really solid. Only a couple times have they been a little wonky. Tarpit comes to mind. A couple of Killer or King Shark scenes are a little weird, but like Grodd's been great. And I'm impressed. I'm excited. It's a good time to be a comic book nerd in this day and age. That's going to be our review of The Flash this week. We thought it was a great episode, but we'd like to know what you thought.
Also, was there any Easter eggs that we didn't mention that you saw? Let us know in the comments down below because we'd like to see this.
Thanks for watching.